there. Before we dive in, just a quick favour to ask. If you're enjoying the show, don't be shellfish. Please take a moment to rate and review it wherever you're listening. It helps more people find us in the big blue ocean of podcasts. You can also support us by hitting that follow or subscribe button, following us on Instagram at Word on the Reef Podcast, and sharing the podcast link with a friend who might love it too. And if you'd like to help keep us afloat, please consider becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month over at patreon.com/wordonthereefpodcast. You'll get a shout out on the show, and your support helps cover the behind the scenes costs like hosting, editing software, and more. Thanks so much. Now let's get into today's episode. This is Word on the Reef, where marine science meets adventure. Join Tanya Murphy and Brett Goodban as we plunge into the wonders of the Great Barrier Reef and explore the mysteries beneath the waves. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Word on the Reef. I'm your host, diver and conservationist Tanya Murphy, and joining me, as always, is Cairns Aquarium's marine educator and fellow ocean enthusiast, Brett Goodban.
Good morning. Look at that, the sun's shining. Isn't that nice?
Beautiful. Get your boats out immediately.
Yeah, until I wash the car.
Well, don't do that.
No, we like the sunshine at the moment. It's nice.
So for our regular listeners, you might already know some of the topics we've been covering over previous weeks. And unfortunately, climate change is one of those topics because it's having a big impact on our oceans at the moment, especially on coral reefs. The cause of climate change, of course, is the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil and gas, especially for electricity generation. But there is good news. We have the solutions. According to the CSIRO, renewable energy is now the cheapest and fastest growing energy source and will remain so for decades to come. So why are so many governments, including our own in Australia, still approving and subsidising new fossil fuel projects? Yes. It pretty much comes down to one thing, the immense power and influence of the fossil fuel industry. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed and wondered, what can I, as one individual, actually do to make a difference on climate change? You're not alone. But the truth is, there are practical, powerful actions individuals can take, and some of them might surprise you. Joining us today to unpack some of those actions is the brilliant Dr Yolanda Waters, founder and CEO of Divers for Climate. Good morning, Dr Waters.
Hello, thanks for having me back.
Well, we had to have you back. We needed at least another hour to talk to you.
Great to have you with us again, Yolanda. And before we dive into the solutions, though, I want to take our listeners on a quick journey to my hometown of Merredin. It's a tiny little farming town and it's nowhere near the ocean. In fact, it's 3 hours drive inland from Perth in the Wheatbelt region of Western Australia. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because something happening there has a huge impact on ecosystems like the Great Barrier Reef. Can you guess what it is, Brett?
I have a sneaky suspicion it might be a wind farm. Am I right?
Yes, it is Western Australia's largest wind farm. So let's go there. We need to fly to Perth and then drive for hours through golden fields of wheat and sheep. Just outside town, the wind turbines of Colgar Wind Farm rise from the horizon. I've driven around them, I've stood underneath them. They're beautiful works of human engineering, and this farm was built nearly 15 years ago with strong community support. The project has operated smoothly ever since. It was built primarily on already cleared farmland, and farmers earn extra income from hosting the turbines while continuing to grow crops and run livestock around them. The wind farm generates enough clean power for up to 150,000 homes and has nearly doubled the amount of renewable energy in WA's main grid. That's the emissions-saving equivalent of planting 9 million trees every year. And it's also been a massive economic boost, creating around 150 construction jobs and contributing over 1.2 million to local community groups and projects. So that's something that I'm proud to say is happening in my hometown, and it's been really wonderful to see that grow over the past 15 years. And the reason I wanted to share this story with everyone is because it shows what's possible. With smart planning, renewables can support regional economies, reduce emissions, and protect the places we love, like the Great Barrier Reef. How good is that? But we've still got a long way to go. Governments are continuing to back fossil fuels, despite the fact that fossil fuels are contributing to climate change, which is the biggest threat to our oceans, causing more floods, bushfires, climate disasters that are impacting our economy, and it's even burning a hole in our wallet. According to RBC Capital Markets, outages at Australia's coal plants have been a major factor in driving up energy prices over the past year because they're aging and getting past their use-by date, and we have new, better technology now. So CSIRO's 2023 study found renewables are now cheaper than nuclear and coal and will remain the most affordable energy source for decades. South Australia, I don't know if you guys have heard about some of the things they're doing, but they're leading the way. They're on track for 100% net renewables by the end of 2027. And very important to say that we must source materials responsibly for renewable energy projects. But the kicker is a clean energy economy requires 535 times less mining than a fossil fuel economy.
Wow.
And most of the materials can be reused and recycled. And that technology is, growing and improving all the time. So with all that in mind, leaves us wondering, why are some politicians still backing new fossil fuel projects and time-wasting nuclear delays? Well, because of the power of the fossil fuel lobby, basically. But there's one power that's even stronger, and that's people power. And we all possess this power, but many people aren't quite sure what to do with it. So that's why Dr. Yolanda Waters is here today to talk about what are the most effective ways individuals can take action on climate change, and what are the most impactful actions we can take. Dr. Waters is a marine social scientist and founder and CEO of Divers for Climate. She first joined us in Season 2, Episode 4, where we discussed how divers and tourism workers are already seeing the impacts of climate change underwater. You can catch up on that previous episode anytime. Just search for Word on the Reef on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. But today, we've got Dr. Waters back because we're diving into what you, our listeners, can do to be part of the solution. What could you go and do right now, today, to help protect the reef from climate change? So we're going to be talking about that in depth today. But first, let's talk about some of the reasons why people aren't taking enough climate action. Like, we've now seen 6 mass bleaching events on the reef in just 9 years.
Yeah.
So it's clear that we need more climate action faster. So why do you think people aren't stepping up quite enough? Is it because they don't care about climate change?
It's not that people aren't stepping up and don't want to step up. We're at such an interesting time at the moment where we've had all the solutions that we need to solve climate change for quite a while now. We've known the science, like the first international climate report came out in 1991, and then we've been developing solutions since then, and the scientists have been obviously yelling them, screaming them from the top of the hills for decades. It's not working, and what we really need to get those solutions over the line is that public support and the political will, like you just kind of said in your opening. And how we do that really depends on communication and people, and how we can get everyone on the same page moving forward, because it's not that people don't agree with the science, but it is super complex and overwhelming, and it is really hard to relate that to your everyday life. And so, there's studies around the world and in Australia that majority of people are aware and concerned about climate change. And I'm sure you guys have both. The conversations that you guys have, it's, yes, there are deniers out there, but they're loud, but they're few.
Yeah, look, I don't see many of them every day.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that's the underlying word at the moment is, from what I'm getting from my guests after all my shows, is that it just feels overwhelming.
For sure.
And then when you break it down so that people can understand it and give them the proper facts, then you can see them at the end of the show, their eyes light up and go, is that all I need to do? So, well, I know it can be overwhelming, but if we just give them those little steps that you're going to give us now, then go for it.
I wish it was as easy as giving a couple of steps or a checklist, but the biggest, all those studies that are saying, people are aware and concerned, but like you said before, they're not quite engaging. They are engaging in actions, but not the full potential of actions we could take to really harness that collective power we would have. And there's a lot of different reasons, but one of the biggest ones, well, there's 2 major ones. One of the biggest ones is what we call self-efficacy. People don't believe they have the capability, the capacity, or the power to actually make a difference. They don't know what to do, how to do it, and they don't believe whether it will work or not, whether it will have an impact. And that can really stop people, especially when life's already busy. People are, cost of living is extremely concerning. People are preoccupied with just getting by, and then to be oh yeah, I care about climate, but I don't really know what to do or how to make a difference. So why would that be a priority for people? And so it does become really tricky. One of the other main barriers is that there's still, even though studies say that the majority of people are aware and concerned, people still have this idea that they're alone, that people don't want to talk about climate change, nobody cares, but everyone's kind of sitting there going, oh, hang on, I care.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the pattern that I see at work. You know, I have to say to people, it's not all just on you. Mm-hmm. It's not just you. Everybody's starting to feel like this now. Everybody wants to help. They just need to know how and sort of guide in the right direction.
There's just so many like social and psychological and just like structural barriers to people asking that really simple question, what do I do? And it's not just like you can't just blame governments and who's doing wrong or not enough, but the environmental movement traditionally hasn't been super welcoming either. It's been very like, well, you must do all this, or it's not good enough. And that's not really inviting for people who are like, oh, okay, I just want to try, but I don't have the capacity to do a lot. You know, how does this work in my life? So like there hasn't really been that safe space for conversation where people can connect the dots to their life, their care, their concern.
Yeah, and you know what, when you say that the safe space, I watch customers during the day when I'm giving them these talks, and one person will come up to me and go, oh, have you got a second? I said, yeah, of course I do.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a little bit about this? And then I'll see someone else look over their shoulder, and then they'll come up because then they feel that, oh, there is other people here that care. And then I end up with 20 people standing there asking me all these questions about how they can help, and it just draws everybody else in. So, it's that feeling that people don't want to bring it up.
Yeah.
Because they think that they're going to be an outcast or that no one's talking about it. But that's not true, is it?
No, and there's really interesting studies about aquariums and zoos specifically being culturally and politically safe spaces where people feel like it doesn't matter where you sit on the political spectrum, doesn't matter what your background culture is, like those are safe because people can choose to learn in their own way. It's a neutral space for creativity and learning, which is great for children but also adults. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that they're very unique, aquariums specifically. And I've forgotten the original question.
That's all right.
We're off.
This is us. Welcome to Yolanda, Tanya and Brett's daily conversations.
Yeah, we're on the radio, aren't we? I forgot about that.
So to sum up, we know that research shows the majority of Australians and people around the world are concerned about climate change and they want to see more done about it, but a very low percentage can identify specific climate actions they can actually take to help. So there's a little bit of a literacy gap, and it's our job as communicators talking to everyone on the radio and things like that to help people know some steps that they can actually take to get involved. And we need to break down those myths. You know, myth one that you mentioned is a lack of self-efficacy, that people think, oh, I'm not a climate scientist or I'm not a marine biologist, therefore there's nothing I can do to help the reef, which it couldn't be further from the truth. So whoever you are, from whatever walk of life, you live on planet Earth, there is something you can do. And the other myth that we've broken down is the myth that I'm the only one who cares and climate concerned people are in the minority, and that is a myth. The majority of people do care, and we just need to normalise talking about it so people aren't afraid to talk to each other and be like, oh, so you care too? Wow, looks like we all care. So when I've been out there volunteering and working in conservation, we might be asking people to sign a petition, and a common feedback we get is, oh, what's the point of signing a petition to the government? It doesn't make any difference. Nothing ever changes. But that's actually, there's a gazillion examples I could offer of when petitions and people power have made a massive difference, and it has changed things. In fact, all the most important positive changes that have happened for our reef, or indeed for any social or environmental cause, have all been because of community action. So, for example, it was only thanks to thousands of people protesting and writing letters and communicating with politicians that the Great Barrier Reef was saved from coral mining and oil drilling in the 1960s and 70s. Did you know that, guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if it wasn't for those grassroots community activists, which was just ordinary people, volunteers and so on, the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park wouldn't exist today. So activism works. And for any listeners that are interested to learn more about that campaign, I strongly encourage you to go back and listen to Season 1, Episode 9 and 10. But to give you one more recent example, in 2023, plans for a Clive Palmer-owned Central Queensland coal mine were rejected by Australia's Federal Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek after thousands of people protested outside Parliament and wrote letters and submissions. And when the media asked Minister Plibersek for her reasons for rejecting the mine, she said she received thousands of letters from concerned reef lovers, and she named that as one of the main reasons why she rejected the mine. So we know people power does work. I could give hundreds more examples, but that's just a couple to inspire people. So, Dr. Waters, what has been your experience in terms of how powerful people power can be?
Another huge question. I suppose people power, I think the initial image that comes to people's minds is some of what you described before, like protest, petition signing, and that is a huge form of people power and advocacy. But I think if you're still on that early journey of, what can I do? It's quite a lot to be like, join a rally. Like, that's not for everyone. And like, with a different hat that I wear, we've done some work, multicultural communities in Sydney and Melbourne, and a lot of migrant communities, they're not quite comfortable with that kind of active protest against the government. And so there are other ways we can conceptualize what people power means. And I think that's where we kind of start when we think about, what can I do about climate change? And it's really funny because people are like, what can I do? Can you give me a list? But then there's studies that show when you give people a list, they don't do it. Because there's too many things on the list.
Sounds like my day off.
So they get overwhelmed and they don't do any, right?
Exactly. They go, give me all the options. I just want small things. So if you give people a list of all the small things they can do, whatever it is, they go, well, if I don't do all of them, it's not worth it at all because that's not going to make a difference. And you're like, well, that's not the point, is it?
Well, there's a sense of incompleteness. If you just do one thing off a list of 100, you feel bad about yourself because you only did one thing out of 100.
And they're like, well, I guess I didn't have an impact on the environment, so what's the point? And there's other studies that show if you shorten that list to maybe 2 or 3 things of different levels of difficulty, that can be more effective. But people still kind of want a list of some kind, but I'm of the opinion that lists are helpful for a lot of people and they're good guidance, but everyone kind of has to find their own climate journey and kind of how they want to contribute, because we look at action on climate change, and I kind of refer to it as climate behaviour just because that's how I studied it, but we can separate it into different spheres in our lives. Like, yes, we can do the household stuff, and we know there's huge direct impact we can have on reducing emissions in the household, whether that's how we change our diet, our transport, our energy use, all those things that everybody kind of already knows. Those are the most impactful. There's obviously other general sustainability actions like recycling, which is great. Less plastic use, great. But in terms of, if we're talking about direct emissions reductions, they're not the most impactful at home. But then if we move out of the home, we've also got social actions, how we talk to others, the work that you're doing, Brett, the aquarium, starting those conversations and shifting this needle that says, actually, we all care and would like to talk about it in a way with no judgment, or no dumb questions. And then you've got the public and the civic sphere, and that's kind of where we start to engage in advocacy, political advocacy, like we're talking about. That's your petition signing, that's your joining environmental groups, that's your rallies. And then obviously there's other stuff you can do. There's planting trees, and that's like on-site, on-the-ground stuff we can do. But there's so many areas where we as individuals can have power, and it's kind of up to the individual to think, well, what does that look like for me? Is it a little bit of everything? Is it, no, actually I'm really busy, I'm just going to focus on one thing in my house I can change? Or I'm going to, make a commitment to start talking about it at work. Or there's a workplace policy I would love to see changed. It's really about finding what works for you. And if every person is kind of doing that, that's people power. Yeah,
that's right. So it's giving the people the thought that you do what you're comfortable with in your space rather than just a list. I mean, I have ADHD. Lists don't work for me. I'll have 400 things to do and do 800 others of things that were supposed to get done. So lists are no good for me.
Well, but I think it's everyone taking climate action in the way that aligns with their passions and skills, right?
That's right?
So yes, we need scientists in the water studying the corals, but we also need people talking on the radio and educating everyone about it. With the examples I gave of people protesting until the Environment Minister rejected a coal mine, it's not just the people that are protesting and talking to the politicians. Like, behind the scenes, there could have been people making snacks for the protesters, doing the data entry or creating the artworks, the posters, the
100%.
the social media. Like, there's every single type of skill that anyone might have. You can do that thing that you love doing, but do it for the benefit of the climate somehow.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's right. And do you think that we should remember that the politicians are there because we voted them in? Do you know what I mean? They're working for the common people of Australia. They're working for us. So we need to keep the pressure on them. You know, we voted you in for a reason. And, petitions and stuff like that, and making them accountable needs to be done.
And I guess something on top of that, and you kind of mentioned it before, Tanya, that a lot of people think petitions don't work. And it is complicated because it's not really taught or spoken about, like how the system works, and that the politicians do work for us, and we are allowed to speak. And you are allowed to express yourselves' opinions.
They're nice people, most of them.
They're humans too, most of them. But they will sit down and have a chat, and you can have that conversation. And I think the ways that you can do that, the channels that you can do that, is not really clear to a lot of people. And I think that idea, like, we're so lucky to live in Australian democracy. And that's, if people truly understood the power that we do have or should have, that would be huge, not just for climate, but any issues that we're pushing for to make people's lives better.
Yeah. Well, I think people assume like, oh, they're politicians. They're getting paid to understand these issues and they're just choosing not to act on it. But the reality is they're just humans, and a lot of politicians don't actually know what's happening on the reef. So like I've met with politicians who had no clue, unfortunately, about some of these issues. I mean, they have a lot on their plate. They have a lot of issues that they need to get across. So the only way they're going to learn about them is if we go and tell them, like, did you know that this is happening in our community? Like, I have gone and explained things to them that they were like, wow, thank you. I did not know that. So whatever, our listeners, whatever issues are bothering you, don't assume that politicians know about it and are just refusing to act. Like, they might not know about it, or they might not have heard from enough people for them to realise how big of an issue it is. So write to them, talk to them, and you might find out that they actually will care once they know about it. And the other thing is that really powerful, like the fossil fuel lobby, they are constantly visiting the politicians and talking to them. So if they're the only ones that are constantly visiting the politicians and talking to them, and none of us are, which side do you think they're going to get more information from?
Yeah.
So I want to dive more deeply into actual tangible actions that people can take. And because I, in my conservation background, I run climate action workshops on this exact topic, I've actually come up with my own handy acronym to help people remember some of the actions they can take to fight climate change. So we're going to dive right into it now. I'd like to share with you, it's as easy to remember as A, B, C, D, E, F. So if you know your alphabet, you can remember actions that you can take on climate change. And as Yolanda mentioned, you don't need to do all of them. You can pick the ones which work for you. So A, B, C, D, E, F. A is for ask. Ask politicians for stronger climate policies. For example, by signing petitions, attending protests if that's for you, writing letters, meeting politicians in person, and of course voting for those who have strong climate policies, which is one of the most impactful times that you can use your voice to ask politicians for the action you want. But of course, outside election time, you can do other things like signing petitions and so on. B is for belong. Join a climate action group in your area. And you can either volunteer for them, or if you don't have much time, you could just donate. And if you don't have money to donate, you could just follow them online and share their content. Attend their events occasionally. They might have documentary screenings. You can keep yourself up to date with the movement and meet lots of other like-minded people and invite more people to join. So you can get your friends and family involved, and some of them might go on to do amazing things within the climate movement. And I think it's really important for people to find out how many different climate action groups there are out there to suit everyone. So you don't need to actually be an activist at a rally to get involved in climate action. There's different groups for everyone. So, for example, if you are a parent, there's an organisation called Parents for Climate. Obviously, that demographic are very concerned about the future that's going to exist for their children. So if you are one of those and you want to get resources on how you can feel better about that and meet like-minded people and take more action, just look up Parents for Climate. And then we've got AYCC, the Australian Youth Climate Coalition. So if you're a young person below the age of 30, I think, and you're looking at what your future is going to be like under climate change, you can meet people with the same concerns and with resources of what you can do through AYCC. Just look them up. We also have the Knitting Nanas. And that, as the name suggests, is a bunch of knitting nanas who are concerned about their grandchildren and what kind of future they're going to have. And they're very peaceful. So if you enjoy knitting, they will sit and knit outside Parliament to peacefully display their concerns about climate change and other things like that. We've also got groups for different cultural backgrounds. So we've got Seed Mob, which is for young Indigenous youth climate action. We've got Our Islands, Our Home, which is for Torres Strait Islanders impacted by rising sea levels. We've got MLI. Yolanda, you're involved in that. Do you want to tell us what MLI is about?
Sure. MLI is the Multicultural Leadership Initiative, and it's trying to empower and engage multicultural leaders around Australia. We know Australia is one of the most multicultural countries in the world, something we're very proud of, but the migrant community hasn't really been included much in the climate conversation, and so we're now trying to figure out how do different communities with different cultural backgrounds and different heritages, ancestries, how do we engage in the climate movement, and what does action look like for those groups? And so, yeah, there's lots of different great community work going on there.
Amazing. Wow. I'm sure there are some listeners that might be interested in that. So belonging to a climate action group can also be to do with your profession. So there's Vets for Climate Action is a group in Australia. There's also Doctors for the Environment Australia. I've got some great friends involved in that, and I've learned a lot from Doctors for the Environment about how climate change is already impacting people's health with heat waves and increased environmental pathogens and things like that is going to be a big risk to people's health. So that's why Doctors for the Environment are very concerned about climate change. And we've got your frontline affected communities. So you've got bushfire survivors for climate action. You've got emergency leaders for climate action. So that's some of the firefighters and other emergency leaders that were involved in things like the Black Summer bushfires. They've seen how bushfires are getting worse and worse and harder to fight. So they've formed this group, Emergency Leaders for Climate Action. And then you've got all kinds of climate action groups for different sports and interests. So obviously there's Divers for Climate. If you are and you don't just have to be a scuba diver. If you're like a snorkeler or anyone that just loves the underwater world, you can be involved with Divers for Climate. Look them up. But you've also got Surfers for Climate. You've got Protect Our Winters, which is about people who love their snow sports, which we know are very threatened by rising temperatures. Our snow seasons are sort of fluctuating. I know they've had like an amazing snow season in Japan right now, but overall the trend is sort of fluctuating to the point where the future of skiing and snowboarding is looking very threatened. And if you want to find out more about it, look up Protect Our Winters. There's also a group called Footy for Climate. I mean, if you like playing football and the summers are getting hotter and hotter, it's obviously making it harder and harder. Front runners is for runners. I guess running is also difficult when you've got heat waves. Outdoors people for climate. If you love the great outdoors, you're going to be seeing the impacts out there, so get involved with them. We've also got Green Music Australia. That is for musicians or people who like going to see live music. They're doing initiatives like making their concerts less carbon intensive and looking at ways to make the music industry more environmentally friendly. You've also got religious groups. So you've got the Australian Religious Response to Climate Change, ARC for short. See what they did there. And you've got the Jewish Climate Network, and there's probably a lot of others that are out there. And then, of course, you've got your traditional environmental groups. So you've got the Australian Conservation Foundation, Greenpeace, WWF, and just here in Cairns, we have the Cairns and Far North Environment Centre, who are always looking for volunteers, doing a lot of amazing work. And, of course, the Australian Marine Conservation Society also doing a lot of work on the ground in Cairns. So if you want to meet like-minded people, go to events and learn more and get more resources about these issues. As you can tell, there are countless groups you can get involved in, and that's not even a comprehensive list. There's probably hundreds. So I just wanted to let everyone know how broad it is. Oh, I even forgot to mention Farmers for Climate. So, farmers are seeing droughts, they're seeing unprecedented floods, they're seeing their crops being flowering and fruiting at the wrong times of year, and many of them sort of live in conservative regional areas, so they might not feel like they can really get involved. I'm not a climate activist, I'm a farmer,
This is such a positive way for our listeners to understand that there is just so many ways that it impacts everybody, isn't it? And there is all of these incredible organisations that want to work together. You know.
And the first step is just reaching out, getting on their email list, and following their socials, and you'll see what actions they have that you can take, and it ranges all the way from simply like signing a petition in the comfort of your home, reading some resources, getting more informed, all the way up to the big actions.
Just being part of it. I just want to add something quickly. Like, these groups, they're incredible. They're so inspiring because it's shown that environmentalism can look different. And, when we talk about climate policy and getting the policy that we need to actually reduce emissions, we always talk about something called the Overton window. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. It's like, it's this safe space of policy where it doesn't matter what government's in charge, it's normal. And like issues that are first radical, they sit outside the window, but eventually the goal is to get it in. For example, women's rights. At one point in time, that was radical. Like, why would you do Like it was
women
radical.
Voting, outrageous.
Exactly. And it took a lot of work from a lot of people to get it to a point where it's now inside the Overton window, where it doesn't matter who's in charge, what party's in charge. If they try to take it away, now they're radical because we've got it to a point where it's normalised. Climate is not quite in that window yet. It's on the outside. It's not radical. It's well accepted, but if the government changes whether we make our targets on climate is still uncertain. So it's not quite within that safe space where it doesn't matter what happens. And these groups have a huge role to play in pushing it into the window. Say, there's constituencies from all over the country, all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of jobs, all walks of life and society who are saying, actually, we care too.
Yep.
the more that there are of those, the more we get inside that window, and doesn't matter, we're not having this huge anxiety attack every election.
That's incredible, because I was actually thinking at work the other day while I was in the middle of my show. I was thinking, it seems like the tide is shifting with what we're hearing people. And so we need to be in that window as soon as possible. Let's get in the window.
We're getting there. I mean, look at all those groups. Like, there's also cricket for climate.
Oh, stop it.
It's a summer sport.
Yeah,
that's
stand
right.
in the sun for hours.
We're getting in the window, and I think just hearing that list of groups, I think, is really reaffirming.
Well, we could get all the Mr. Whippies in Australia. Ice cream for climate. I mean,
I'm in.
The ice cream will melt.
Yeah. Well, if there's any listeners out there and you feel like you're in a niche that is impacted by climate and hasn't already got a group, well, just start one in your local community, get together with other people, or just start an online group for, I don't know, like whatever group you're in.
Even our listeners listening to this show, Tanya, our 11th episode, right? It's pretty clear that we love the planet. And it's pretty clear that our listeners do too. So even if you're sitting in your car right now or sitting on the couch having a nice Vovo and a cup of tea, and you take that hour to listen to us, then you're learning as much as you can about the environment from us, and you're taking action.
Absolutely. Anyone who has been tuning in
absolutely.
is taking action.
Yeah, so thank you.
Give yourself a pat on the back. So I am going through an acronym that helps people remember climate actions they can take. So A, B, C, D, E, F. A is ask, politicians for stronger climate policies. B is for belong to a group, and that's one we've just talked about. C is for communicate. Talk to friends, family, colleagues, customers at work, if that's appropriate for your workplace. Like if you're giving presentations at the aquarium, or if you're working if you're a tour operator, do talk to the customers about climate impacts on your tours, environmental assets. You can also create and share online content, write letters to the newspaper and to politicians. Going to a sort of a higher level, you can talk to the media, start a radio show, give speeches. And I think we can talk a bit more about communication in a minute, because I know it's something Yolanda is very knowledgeable about, how to communicate with people about climate change, because it's something that makes people a little bit nervous sometimes. But I'm going to finish this little acronym of things to do about climate change. So we've done ABC, we're up to D, which is for divest. Find out if your bank or super fund invest in fossil fuels and move to a cleaner alternative. So check out a website called marketforces.org.au. It gives you the full list of all the banks in Australia and super funds and what they invest in, whether it be fossil fuels, or there are actually many now that don't invest any money of your money in fossil fuels, that just invest in renewables and other ethical projects. And that's something that really helped me make a shift. Letter E is for electrify. To whatever degree you can afford, invest in solar power, electric heating, cooking and transport. And that's something that not everyone can afford to do straight away, but we also can push for policies from our politicians that will make it more affordable for people to access things like renewable energy. And the last letter is F for First Nations ally. Support First Nations people who are fighting for a voice and rights to protect their land from destructive mining projects. So to give an example, the Wangan people are currently camping on their land to protest the Carmichael Adani coal mine. And they've been camping there for a few years now, protesting against that and sort of directly getting in the action of trying to stop that coal mine from impacting their traditional land. We know that there's traditional owners in the Northern Territory trying to fight gas fracking, which is going to impact their water and their land. There's Torres Strait Islanders campaigning and even recently took the government to court for failing to act on climate change, which is resulting in sea level rise that's going to essentially destroy their islands. In South Australia, we've seen traditional owners win a court case to stop nuclear waste dumping on their land. So traditional owners are part of the climate impacted communities, and we need to be there for them and, help them to have that voice to protect their land and their environment from destructive mining projects. So ABC, D, E, F, it's a little bit to remember. Ask, belong, communicate, divest, electrify, and First Nations ally. That's 6 categories of individual actions you can take to fight climate change. And if you'd like to get a cheat sheet, 'cause it's a bit to remember, with all of those written down, I will post it on the Word on the Reef Instagram page later, so make sure you check it out. And of course, you don't need to take all of these actions because, like we discussed earlier, it can seem overwhelming. So it's more like a menu that you can choose from and decide which actions stood out the most for you. If you've just joined us, our guest today is Dr Yolanda Waters, marine social scientist and founder and CEO of Divers for Climate. And my co-host Brett Goodban is here, and he's just reminded us it's a very important day today, Brett.
Yes, it is. It's World Endangered Species Day today, and we need to remind ourselves that we have over 2,000 species listed in Australia as endangered. And in 2023, we had another 144 added to it. So we need to be thinking about all of these beautiful animals today.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah.
That's the type of list that you don't want to be on.
No, it's not.
We want to try to get some of those animals off that
list. But as we know, if we can come off them. Look at the humpback whale was removed from the IUCN Red List as critically endangered because we stopped whaling. So yes, we can do it. People power.
Yes, self-efficacy.
There you go.
So we've been talking with Dr. Waters, who is a marine social scientist, about climate actions that we can all take in our own lives to help protect the Great Barrier Reef from its biggest threat, which is climate change. So Dr. Waters, we've talked about a lot of actions, but not everyone has time to do all of them. So which climate actions are the most impactful?
I think it's important to start by clarifying when we say climate action, what do we mean? Because it means a lot of different things. And I guess in the context that we speak about it in the reef, we talk about climate mitigation. So what is everything we can do to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that are in the atmosphere? And this is just one way to think about climate action. You can also think about adaptation, like how do we move through this warming world that we know is going to warm a little bit anyway. And you can also think of conservation work, which is about building resilience and making sure nature is there for us in the future, which is also important. And they're all important pieces of this big puzzle. And so I just wanted to clarify, climate action in this context is how do we reduce emissions? And so then we think about impact, and there's many ways we can think about impact. We can think about direct impact. What can I do that will directly reduce greenhouse gas emissions? And then there's indirect. What can I do that will influence potentially other steps that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions? Direct impact is usually things we can do in our lifestyles and our homes. And I know there's this argument that it's the big corporations. Shouldn't be my fault. My carbon footprint. We know that term was coined by a fossil fuel company, but that's not what it's about. It is, especially in a country like Australia, like we do have a slightly larger carbon footprint. And if you can reduce your own greenhouse gas emissions, if it's within your means, it's something that is worthwhile doing. But again, emphasising, like we've said this whole episode, you don't have to do all the things. If we're thinking about in the household, there are some big ones, like transport, car and plane use. There's diet, there's eating less red meat, having more plant-based diets. And then there's, of course, the energy usage in your home, switching to renewable energies. Impact-wise, those are huge things. Food waste is also another one, reducing food waste. That's actually a surprisingly huge one.
Yeah.
And fast fashion, right? Like the clothing you buy.
Yeah, it's not actually up there in the top few, like compared to those other ones, but it is massive. Like this is why it's hard to talk about impact because they're all big, and it's not like you have to pick the most ones. But if someone was like, well, what are the 3 big ones that they kind of sit in those like diet, transport, and energy? But obviously, fast fashion does have a huge impact on our climate. So if you can reduce your consumption of clothing and fast fashion items, like that's amazing. But thinking about direct impact. And this is why I talk about, we're just saying direct impact in reducing emissions. Those things that themselves, like if everyone stopped driving a car, if everyone ate vegetarian or plant-based, if everyone switched to renewable energies, we'd save a huge amount of greenhouse gas emissions. But is that feasible at all, right? Especially if you're going to people in Far North Queensland and you say, don't drive your car, like that's not at all feasible or possible for most people living in Queensland, actually.
Yeah,
we just don't have
far apart.
Exactly. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have
good public transport.
Plant-based diets. For health reasons, some people can't do that as well, Accessibility to plant-based food, to fresh foods, sometimes meat's the only option. It's the cheapest option sometimes as well if you're feeding a family. And so it's really important to not just think about impact, but adoptability. So how likely is we'll do it?
Yeah, and so important not to judge what actions other people are taking.
100%.
Like one of the worst things that people can do for the climate movement is pointing the finger at other people and saying like you're eating wrong or you're not recycling right, when we all should just be accepting that everyone's on a different part of their journey and might be doing different
100%.
things.
It's the wrong message.
Yeah, 100. Everyone just trying their best.
Yeah.
And so we think about adoptability. So you have a small family, you live in regional Queensland, reducing car travel out of the picture, that's fine. Maybe you're not ready to, nobody has to go full plant-based or vegetarian. Like I think the research is like if everyone swapped 2 or 3 meat meals a week to plant-based, just 2.
Yeah.
Like that would have a huge impact. That's trying one family dinner a week.
Yeah, we need thousands of people doing things imperfectly rather than 1 or 2 people who are doing it 100% perfectly.
Exactly. So when you hear this list of these are the impactful things, you can take that and think, well, how is there a level or way I could do that? If yes, or how do I adapt that to my lifestyle? And if not, maybe they're just not the actions for me. Like, it's hard. It is really hard. And I'm guilty of, for example, flying a lot for my job. That's something that I'm trying to kind of get around, but you have to accept we're not perfect, and we try our best.
There's another, I'm a bit of an av geek myself, but there's another avenue if you dig deeper on how the airline industry are working towards sustainable fuels, more energy efficient aeroplanes and engines.
This is a thing, It's the same with tourism. Everyone's trying to decarbonise and do better.
Yeah.
So, like, why would we shame anyone for not doing one thing instead of another?
Well, it's almost like a strategy of the fossil fuel industry is to try and get us all pointing our fingers at each other instead of just banding together against the common goal.
So we've talked a bit about direct actions, which is how you can directly reduce greenhouse gas emissions in your own life. But that's just one way of many ways we can contribute to this climate movement. And the other way is indirectly, we can advocate, which is kind of what we've already touched on this whole episode, is how we advocate for corporations and governments to do their part to reduce emissions. Because ultimately, we can reduce hundreds of tons of emissions in our own lives. But if the government can maybe not propose a new coal mine, that's huge. So, and a lot of those actions are what we've covered already, like social actions, how we talk about it, how we spread that social movement that makes talking about climate change more normal. You said before, divesting, making sure our money's being invested in good things for the planet, not bad things, and then advocating that decision makers make decisions that are in line with science and in line with climate targets that we need to have. The tricky thing is those things are hugely impactful but hard to measure impact wise. Like, you can't say, I signed this petition, I reduce X amount of emissions, but they're hugely impactful. It's just in an indirect way. So it's just important when we think about impact that there's some nuance to it. There's direct, indirect, and there's adaptability, and thinking about, well, what does it actually mean for me to take an action, and how can I do it, and to what extent is it feasible?
Just quickly, I know you've touched on it a bit, but what about recycling and using our reusable keep cups and reusable bags and all of those waste-related things? How impactful is that on climate change?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a thing we find in environmental kind of social science research is that we call it recycling bias. It's because we've been ingrained in us that the only environmental action we can take as individuals is recycling. And recycling's great. It can be more or less effective depending on where you are and how your local place recycles. But it is a great action, and it does make people feel like they're doing something that is part of a bigger picture, or they're doing what they can in their home. So like recycling and keep cups, great small actions. But if we're talking, again, on our definition of climate action, which is if we're reducing emissions, really those things are not having an impact. We're just at a point in time, we're in such a critical decade for our reef, for our oceans, for our planet, that if we can be taking those more impactful things in terms of reducing emissions, like if we could do that, that'd be amazing, because we're just, the faster that we can do things, every fraction of a degree matters. So let's take that next step together if you can. Yeah,
and that has been the thing that we've focused on for so long for people, is to save the planet. We recycle, we pick up rubbish, and that's absolutely 100%, right? Let's keep doing that. We all know how to do that because we've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
And it's just guiding people to that next step. Okay, we've got that bit.
Yep.
Right?
Got
awesome.
that down.
We just need to nudge people in another direction as well. Let's tick off another box and let's think about the bigger picture. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what about things like getting involved in citizen science, like doing coral surveys and coral restoration and things like that? Because tourists come to the Great Barrier Reef and a lot of them ask me, like, how can I do a coral survey or plant a coral so that I can do something to directly help the Great Barrier Reef? So what about things like those coral surveys and coral planting and things that people can do on the reef?
Directly speaking, a lot of that citizen science data is not directly going to reduce emissions. It will help improve our scientific models. It will help with a lot of management decisions. It's fantastic. But it's not directly, the goal of it is not to advocate government to reduce emissions. And same with restoration. Restoration's about building resilience and giving power back to dive operators, for example, and tourism to really protect and have stewardship over their sites, which is also fantastic. And I guess the role that I see that playing is getting people in conversation. And that's where a group like Divers for Climate come in. We go, hey, you had all these experiences, awesome. If you also want to channel some of that into lobbying action from the government, we can help too. Like all those groups, restoration, citizen science, everybody that partakes and runs those programs also want more climate action. And so it's kind of like you can help each other out. So everything has a role to play in just shifting this bigger picture. But I think it's important that people that do engage in those things, they also need the tools. Like, I think something about the reef is people think once they leave the reef, they can't help. And so it's important that people that do engage in things that are out on the water they're given that, oh, you had a great experience, you've helped, that's awesome, you want to keep helping, here's how you can take this home. And the things that you can take home, a lot of it is climate action that can be done anywhere in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I hear from a lot of people who are like, I'm coming to Australia for a holiday for 2 weeks and I want to help protect the Great Barrier Reef while I'm there. I want to do some coral planting or something. And a lot of the time I'm like, well, if you're only here for 2 weeks, like you, with some exceptions, usually to really plant coral or do surveys in a way that's really effective and impactful, you need quite a bit of experience and training. You need to be quite an experienced diver to handle corals and plant them. They're very sensitive. You can actually just kill them if you handle them incorrectly. So there's quite a bit of training required for that. And so you can do those things, but honestly, if you really want to help the reef, one of the most impactful things you can do is just take action at home in your own day-to-day life, wherever you live. If you live tens of thousands of kilometers away on the other side of the earth, you can still take action to help protect the Great Barrier Reef in your everyday life. So wherever you live in the world, join a climate action group, get involved in the climate action movement. And that's actually one of the most impactful things that you can do to help the reef. So the best thing you can do if you're just here for a holiday for a couple of weeks is just visit the reef, just see it, just love it, enjoy it, learn about it, support the tourism operators who are doing that restoration and research work with their expertly trained staff. Just support them and then go home and join a climate action group in your home city. So, as I mentioned, the letter C in ABCDEF stands for communicate. So some people find it a little bit scary to talk to others about climate change. I mean, I still sometimes in some contexts I get a bit nervous talking to others about climate change because what if it offends or upsets them or something?
Not as offended as the fish, though.
Something that was in your research, Dr. Waters, you advised that you don't need to spend too much time on the threat and the depressing facts about climate change because people already know a lot about it generally, don't they? So you can sort of be positive with them by moving quite quickly. You do need to say the threats, but you don't need to dwell on them. You can move quite quickly to the solutions and giving them actions they can take. Is that accurate?
Yeah, people know things are not looking great. People are smart. You know, people, like, even if, you know, they don't quite trust the media, like they've experienced themselves. Like the survey we just did of divers alone shows that 90% feel like they've personally experienced climate change. And I'm sure that number, it translates to people who experience more extreme bushfires, floods, heat waves. Like people are feeling it. And so there's just not a lot of point really hyper-focusing on the threat and the doom and the gloom because you don't want to, people like...
What can I actually do about it? That is the number one question that people ask.
It's important to put it there. There's a lot of mixed emotions that come into motivating people through a conversation. And grief and that sadness that we will lose things is part of it. But it's important to know it's not all of it. You do need to mix that with, you know, hope and active hope. So, like, the ingredients that we've kind of come up with is, like, grief, wonder, like hope and wonder, and what are we saving? What are we protecting? Why are we here?
Why do we care? Why do we need to save this?
Why do you care? Why are we both here? And then the action. Here's how we can do it, and here's how it will work, and that we can do it together. And that's kind of those are the ingredients that help make a message powerful. And I will say those are the ingredients, but what's really important is how you pull them together in a story and how you as a messenger connect with the person you're speaking to.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been in a very unique position, haven't I, over the past 8 years to be able to survey just in my shows. And what I have noticed over the past couple of years is some people coming up to you and go, this is really personal to you, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? And it sort of startles you at first because you're doing the show as you would do because you love it and you have all that passion. And then when you have a customer walk up to you and put their hand on your shoulder and go, this really means a lot to you, doesn't it? And people are really finding that connection. They say, geez, it must be really hard for you guys.
Yeah.
It must. And I say, it is. We're seeing this.
Yeah, well, what you've just said really nails the concept of communicating with people about climate concerns, and that is using your personal story. So for you are putting across your personal, how climate change is impacting the reef that is a major part of your life. And so people know that this isn't just someone who's being paid to relay graphs and scientific facts. No. They're making an emotional connection with you, and that is impacting them emotionally. People connect with these issues a lot more on personal stories and emotions and feelings and what's actually happening to you in your real life than they do with graphs and statistics. And that is one of the key points about science communication, is that scientists, they have their graphs, they have their statistics and their numbers and how many CO2 parts per million and blah, blah, blah. But we know that we need that science, but that's not what changes hearts and minds. And what changes hearts and minds, you don't need to know all the statistics, which are constantly changing and getting updated. You can just do you. Like all the listeners out there, if you are not an aquarium educator, but you're a farmer, or you've been impacted by floods, or you've been impacted by heat waves, your way of communicating with people about climate change is just talking about your personal story and how it's impacting you. And that's really important. And that's why, you know, a lot of people say, I don't think I'm qualified to talk to anyone about climate change because I'm not a climate scientist and there's too many facts and statistics to remember. But the reality is you don't need to know all the facts and statistics, and you don't need to be a climate scientist to talk about your personal experiences and make a connection and have an emotional impact on people, isn't it?
Yeah, and just to add something, like, people can argue statistics and graphs whether they're a scientist or not. People feel like a bit mistrustful, and they can argue and be like, I don't believe that's how you got that answer. But they can't argue your personal experience, and they can't argue how you feel.
Yep.
And so whether they agree with you or not, they can at least acknowledge how it's impacting you. And I guess the goal is to figure out how it's impacting them and try and get that other response.
Yeah, so I encourage everyone out there who wants to think about having a prepared conversation starter or response in case you get into a conversation with someone about climate change is to spend a little bit of time thinking about why you're concerned about it. You know, do a little bit of a inner searching, like, are you worried about your own future or the future of your children or the future of ecosystems you love, your house, your insurance prices? It's a personal story, and that means that everyone has efficacy to talk about climate change, basically.
Yeah. And if you're a diver, share your story with us. Yay!
Yeah. Yes, Divers for Climate. Obviously, Dr. Waters here is the CEO and founder of Divers for Climate, and they are looking for divers to share their personal experiences of climate change. So make sure you get in touch with them if you have some stories to tell. I wanted to add in something that I use in my climate action workshops that I do, and it's called the spectrum of allies. And so if you just imagine it's like a spectrum all the way from, on one side, there's people who already agree with us, who are already active in the climate movement. And then it goes all the way on the other side to people who are actively opposed. They're climate deniers. They will argue with you. They are very opposed to doing any climate action. And then, of course, in the middle, you've got people who are on the fence. And so when you are thinking about who to talk to raise awareness about climate change, we say you can pretty much avoid talking to the people who are on the far denial side, who are actively opposed, because it will most likely exhaust you and not change their mind because their mind is too made up. You can try, but if they're just not ready for that conversation, you can just politely change the subject or move on to save your precious energy for those other people in the middle. And the research shows that the majority of people, especially Australians, are in the middle, which means they're on the fence. They know a bit about climate change, they're worried about it, they're a little bit concerned, but they just don't know what to do about it, and they are feeling overwhelmed and confused by misinformation. So that means we can make a big difference on them because they have a lot of questions. They might want to ask, well, what can I actually do about it? And that means we have an opportunity to actually move them. Maybe we can't move them all the way to being a full-blown climate activist, but we can just set the seed that moves them a tiny step closer. You know, if they're coming out to visit the Great Barrier Reef and they find out some of the impacts of climate change that are happening, that might move them one tiny step closer towards their eventual journey to taking action. And next year, they might go on a holiday to Iceland and see the markers of how far the glaciers have retreated, and that'll move them another step closer to being motivated enough to take climate action. So just think about it as in every conversation counts, and focus on those people who are on the fence, who we can actually influence.
That's right. To walk 1,000 miles, you got to take the first step, right?
Yep, everyone's on a journey.
One of the biggest things that I teach or I ask of any new staff that come into the place is I said that you have to listen. You have to listen to them. You need to show them that you are genuinely interested, regardless as to whether they come up to you and they start pointing at you with the finger and they go, this isn't true. You need to give them that opportunity to have their say and back yourself and go, well, look, can I suggest this? And they'll go, oh, I didn't know that. So that's okay. That's why we're here. Mm-hmm. And then hopefully by the time you've had a chat to them for 10 minutes, they're shaking your hand and go, oh, I'll change this. You go, good on you, buddy. You know, you just have to, people don't respond to this being barked at or pointed at or any of this. You know, it's just anybody, you walk up to anybody, friends, family or whatever, and start pointing your finger in their face, even if they know you, you're going to go, well, you can put that finger away, champ. What's going on?
Yeah.
What are you doing that for? And so you can't expect a complete stranger to start doing that to you and go, you need to change, you need to do this, because you're just going to go, mate, I'm not another bar of this.
I think there's a lot of synergy just between general life communication skills in your relationships, in your interpersonal relationships. Like if you get into a disagreement with your partner or your family member, one of the top communication tips is to actually, instead of just talking over them or whatever, is to just actually start asking questions and listen to what they have to say, because then you'll get a really deep understanding of why is this person objecting? Yeah,
that's right. And the way that I'll do it in the end is I'll say, oh, do you mind telling me where you heard that information? Where did you hear it from?
Yeah, why do you feel that way?
Oh, my mate told me. Okay, so where did he hear it from? Oh, I don't know. So, okay. And then I leave it. And I've just planted the seed in them now, because then they're starting to go, well, maybe he wasn't right. He was a gardener told an Uber driver that told his mates. But then I sort of leave it with them to mull over
percolate.
That. Yeah, and then they'll go, oh, okay, well, you kind of know what you're talking about, so.
No, what you're describing is super important. It's that you have to go on this personal, internal journey. You know, people don't respond to having something put on them. You have to come to the answer yourself, even if it's the same answer in the end. And it has a theory in science. It's called transformative learning. There's 10 steps to it, and it starts with a dilemma where people experience something that goes against their beliefs. And it shakes them up, and they go, hang on, what?
The walls go up.
Yeah, that's the first thing. They go, oh, okay, all right. But then kind of all these different ingredients in life help guide them down the next 10 steps, which is just this process of really thinking through your beliefs and then coming back around the way to come back to an action. And you go on this whole journey, like learning, questioning, you know, and you come out to the answer yourself. And I think that's kind of what you guys are describing, this like internal experience, and that's more likely to stick than if someone's giving you a pamphlet and go, do this.
Yeah, I feel like that's the tactic of housewives everywhere. Make the other person think it was their idea. So you just be like, oh, okay, so you think that's the best thing to do? Okay, but why? Why do you think that? Have you thought that through? All right, so I'm actually getting to my last question, which is, we've touched on it quite a bit already, that we don't all need to be climate scientists or marine biologists or so on to take climate action. It's going to take all of us, whatever background we might be from. So do you often get asked by people, Dr. Waters, about what sort of pathway should I take in my career if I want to help fight climate change?
Always. Not specifically climate change, but how can I help the reef? What career can I get in marine conservation? I think there's this idea that you have to be a marine biologist, and that's the only way. And I mean, I thought that's how I got here. Like, I kind of asked the questions, realized I wasn't great at biology, but there was another way in. Because we've got the solutions that we need. The answer is shifting hearts and minds, like you've been saying. It's shifting people. And there's such a huge range of skills that we need to shift people. But there's so many other routes, and I wish I'd known this earlier. Like, if there's any way you can influence people, if you work with people, whether it's through the arts, whether it's through tourism, whether it's through communication, journalism, there's so many ways you can influence the people around you, and any kind of line of work that way can help marine conservation, can help with climate action. You might have to do some jiggling around to make it specifically fit the field that you want to work in. For example, there's no marine social science courses at university that I know of, but if you study communication, if you study something else, you can choose to focus on, the Great Barrier Reef marine environments. You also don't have to take an academic path at all. Some of the best communicators and naturalists I know don't have a degree, but they are fantastic communicators and can definitely get a message across to an audience. So I really just encourage anyone thinking of getting this field to, instead of thinking, how do I get there, think, what are you good at and what do you like doing? What brings you joy? What are your skills that you currently have? What would you love to tap into? And then try and figure out, well, how can I help using that? I mean, marine biology sounds great, but there's so many other millions of paths to help out.
There is.
Yeah, obviously science is very important, but if people don't know about the science and politicians ignore the science, then nothing's going to change. So we need the artists, the communicators, the talkers, the interpersonal communicators, and the people who make the snacks and the people who are behind the scenes doing the data entry or whatever it is that you can do. Think about how you can lend that towards climate awareness. A really good influencer that has written a few books about the topic is Rutger Bregman, who is German, obviously. And he basically says that everyone from now on needs to get a career fighting climate change. Whether you're, from an accountant to a lawyer, do what you're talented at in a way that you can somehow be helping the climate. So all those people thinking about careers, you can do it in a way that tackles the biggest challenge of our time and the biggest challenge for our reef, which
We need everyone.
We need everybody. We need 100% of the world's population doing it imperfectly. Guys, we're obviously just going to have to get you back again in the time.
Or have a 3-hour show.
Yeah, because we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell people about Divers for Climate and what's something people can do right now to help protect the Great Barrier Reef through your organisation, Divers for Climate.
Yeah, we currently have a national statement called the I'm a Diver for Climate statement, and we're trying to get 10,000 signatures from divers and more than 100 dive centres to sign on around the country to say we'd like to see stronger climate action to protect our dive sites. We'd like to see more support for resilience and adaptation for our dive centres and our industry, because we know that the ocean's changing and it is affecting businesses. They're having to close down more because of extreme weather. And we're trying to just show that there's a groundswell of support for more climate action from the ocean-loving community, which I think it's been shown through groups like AMCS. It has been shown before, but given we're a country surrounded by ocean, there could always be more voices in the game. And so we'll be taking that statement. We're already taking it to MPs around Australia. We'll be taking it to the new government. We'll be taking it to Parliament House at some point, probably
Awesome.
early next year. So please, if you're a diver, come and sign the statement, share it. And if you have a climate story, we'd love to help amplify it, because we know normalising the conversation is a huge part of the work that needs to be done. Yeah.
Wow, amazing elevator pitch for Divers for Climate.
Excellent.
Thank you. So everyone out there who wants to take some action right now, I want you to stop what you're doing unless you're driving or operating heavy machinery,
Yes.
and
Or flying a plane.
open up your social media and follow Divers for Climate. Look up their website, join their mailing list, sign that national action that Yolanda talked about, and we will see you next week on Word on the Reef, 10 a.m. next Friday.
Have a good week.
Thank you.
Bye.